All right. We're going to get started so we can finish on time. I appreciate everyone being here this afternoon. My name is John Waldrop. I'm part of the training team at CSAC, and I will be doing the first part of this presentation. I see a lot of familiar names, in the participant list. So I appreciate you guys being here today. I just wanted to turn on my camera for a second so I could introduce myself and show you that I'm not a bot or an android or Bill Gates' special electronic friend. So now that we've gone through the human testing here, I'm going to turn off my video. I find I uses a lot of bandwidth, and I'm looking at a screen that's over here, and nobody wants to watch that for an entire presentation. So I'm going to turn off my camera. We are going to get going. Again, thank you for being here. Just a quick reminder, and I will reiterate this. We have a lot of people standing by who can answer questions. Please take advantage of that and use the Q&A box beginning now. And we're going to get going. So thanks. Okay, so what are we going to talk about today? Well, we're going to start by talking about the extended deadline. So you know that traditionally we have a May 2nd deadline. That got pushed off for a month previously. So we were able to push that out for another month into early April. And then we realized that a lot of students were still struggling to get the application done. And so this new legislation extended the deadline even further to May 2nd. So we have about 20 days left, and we are really pushing hard for students to complete their applications, especially these students who are struggling with parents who don't have socials. But we have a new deadline. We want to make sure that students are completing the application, and we want to, put that May 2nd deadline up on a wall somewhere. All righty, so our agenda for today, there's really two main things that we're talking about. So one of them is this new CADAA option for mixed status families. We're going to talk about that, what it is, who should use it, who can use it, what's going to happen if those students eventually are able to complete their FAFSA. And, we just want to recognize that the FAFSA has been challenging since it rolled out. We know that. It literally from the first day was only open a few hours a day. And then it's just been kind of a series of different issues. And we're still having some different issues. But the group or the cohort that was impacted the most were these mixed status families. And so if you don't know, a mixed status family is the student is FAFSA eligible because they're a citizen or an eligible non-citizen, i.e. a permanent resident, but the parent or parents don't have a Social Security card. So these mixed status families have really had a lot of challenges from the very beginning. And they're the ones I think who are being impacted the most. And in California, that means it's tens of thousands of families potentially who are having difficulty. So we are impacted, I think, more than any other state. Now, we're also going to talk about the FAFSA and talk about some updates, talk about some workarounds that FSA has provided. And we want to make sure that people have the latest information about this verification process and the incomplete FAFSA. What am I looking at? Oh, I'm sorry, my bad. Someone said they couldn't see my screen. Yeah, that's helpful. That's helpful. All right, good call, good catch, good safety tip. So now we're looking at the right screen. I'm not going to repeat everything. Read quickly. So this is what we're talking about. Like I said, I was saying that we're also going to talk about FAFSA updates and corrections and workarounds. And then we're going to also talk about supporting students and some best practices for supporting students. And just a FYI, a little aside, FSA has been saying that the ability for students to make corrections would be in the first half of this month. So they just really recently said that we can expect that next week that is going to open broadly for students to be able to do that. All right, good. No one has to remind me. I'm going to advance this next slide. There we go. All right, so this is a timeline of what we've seen with some of the barriers with FAFSA. It opened December 30th. We had challenges from the very beginning because when it opened, if you recall, it was 1 hour a day, and then it was a couple hours a day, and then it was hit or miss. Um, and it's just kind of been like that with a lot of technical issues along the way that have impacted many, many students, especially those who have a non-SSN contributor. And that is the group, that's the cohort that's really struggling right now. So when it opened, we had some challenges, and it was almost impossible for the non-SSN contributors to get a case number or to go through that verification process. Remember, FSA said, oh, they're going to get a little TransUnion pop-up, and they're going to answer, 1 to 4 questions, and they'll be good to go. And that didn't work great. So most families didn't even see that. They immediately got the message saying, no, you have to do some additional verification. And they were provided with some different workarounds. So in March, again, FAFSA, FSA was saying, well, try this and do this. And a lot of those, frankly, were not effective. Our families just said this is too time consuming, and they were not confident that those workarounds would actually help them. We saw a delay in processing because of technical issues and also because of errors that they found that caused a large number of applications that needed to be reprocessed. And we're seeing that currently, right? So they rolled it out, they made a mistake. Oh, now we have to reprocess all these applications. Now, having said that, I think about 7+ million, applications have gone through, which people go, oh, 7 million, that sounds good. But it's down significantly from where we've been in years past. So I don't want to be negative, just trying to give you up-to-date factual information. We just recently opened the CADAA, so that's the California DREAM Act application, for students to do, first-time filers from a mixed status family. We are opening up the CADAA, and this is really what we're here to talk about today, so that they are able to use this as an alternative. So while they're in this holding pattern with their FAFSA application, they can fill out the DREAM Act application. We're going to talk about that in more detail. And there's some, really compelling reasons that they should consider doing that. So in the future, impacted students who do this workaround, this CADAA workaround, they're probably still, and they probably should, continue to do their FAFSA. That will give them consideration for state aid, i.e. Pell Grant, and federal work study, and loans. So we think that's the option that most families are going to pursue. So that's where we're at, and this is the timeline of how we've started and where we are now. Okay, so the mixed status families have really had some barriers and some challenges, as they've gone through this process. And honestly, when FSA kind of rolled out with their game plan to deal with non-SSN contributors, we, on the over/under, I took the under because it just seemed like it was a little bit convoluted, and we were greatly concerned because we know that there are thousands and thousands of families who are mixed status, and we wanted to make sure that students would be able to complete an application and make it seamless and quick and process through for aid. And frankly, that hasn't been the case. So the contributor has just been unable or virtually unable to create an account, right? So if you're a contributor, just like if you're a student, you have to create an FSA ID. If you recall in years past, students would have to print out that paper signature page and mail it in. And we used to all say how horrible it was and how long it took. And now some of us are saying, man, that paper signature page seemed like a great idea. Let's bring that back. But we've gone past that. That ship has sailed. And so these contributors, one or both parents, depending, have to create an FSA ID. And it's been difficult. If they're able to do it, the verification process is really difficult to complete. So like I said, we had TransUnion where those questions were going to pop up, and families, were going to be able to say, yes, I lived here previously. Yes, I worked here previously. Yes, I got a cell phone from this company. And that was going to be the quick and easy, down and dirty way for them to verify their identity. That has not worked very well. I've seen it work with a few families, honestly, but I don't know. In the dozens and dozens and dozens of families that I've helped who are mixed status, I think I've seen it work 3 times or maybe 4. So that's kind of where we're at. Now, the other problem, and not just for mixed status families, but anyone who's having a challenge with the FAFSA, is that we have upcoming financial aid deadlines. So we know that we now have a deadline of May 2nd, which is our priority deadline for completing either a FAFSA or a CADAA. And we've got a very limited window, like I mentioned, in order to get these applications done. And I think this needs to be our focus. We also know that because it's been so overwhelming, it's been difficult for students to get support. That the answer from FSA has been call us, and it's been if you've tried that, that it's been difficult. We've had students spend hours on the phone trying to get through, and sometimes they would get through and the person wasn't able to assist them, or sometimes because that call center got so overwhelmed with calls, they would just drop off. So that was challenging and frustrating. We've also seen that information is changing really quickly. Like we've had periods where every day FSA would offer up a new workaround or something else. We've seen, for those of us who were out doing cash for college events and financial aid nights, we found some really strange things that you had to do in order for that application to go through, even for the student. So when that's what we're dealing with, that's a huge challenge. Again, this is kind of where we're at. And I just want to mention this. Look, everyone is having issues, right? There's so many families and so many students who are having challenges, and I know it's frustrating for them, and I know it's frustrating for those of us who are trying to help them, but we're all in this boat together. We're going to push and do the best that we can do. We have to, right? So we have to continue to try to help these students. CSAC is going to offer as much support as we are able to offer, with workshops and webinars and information and things posted on our website, tips and tricks and whatever else we can do. So I'm hopeful and confident that we're going to get through this together. All right. Now, let's talk very specifically about this new CADAA option for mixed status families. You probably know that there aren't that many states that offer a path to financial aid for undocumented students. Right now, it's currently about 17, and it looks different state to state. California not only offers a path to financial aid for undocumented students, we have a proprietary application. We offer the most aid. So undocumented students in the state of California are lucky because they have the opportunity to complete an application, to be given consideration for state aid and institutional aid and other programs. And so in that sense, California is a great place to be. A lot of states cannot say the same. So we opened up this CADAA to a new cohort of students. And this is really specifically to help these students fill out an application. And we're going to talk about why that's important. I want to remind you, if you have questions, continue to use the Q&A. We have tons of people standing by who can answer your questions, who would be happy to answer your questions. So ask really hard questions. I'm not answering questions, so I would say, hey, ask really hard questions for my colleagues. So let's talk about this new CADAA option for mixed status families. We are opening up the California DREAM Act application for first-time filers who are from mixed status families. Now, I want to reiterate, right now it's open for first-time filers. So these are typically your high school seniors, that entitlement cohort, anyone filling out FAFSA for the first time could be included in that. But right now I think we're looking primarily at high school seniors who are trying to get through this process. Why would they want to fill out this CADAA while they're sort of, like I said previously, in a holding pattern with their FAFSA? So there's a couple compelling reasons. So one, they will get a date that's assigned to that application. So that's a pretty good reason. There's a bunch of other good reasons. It will help these students apply for state aid and institutional aid. Now, obviously, through CADAA, students are not going to be given consideration for federal aid. They're going to have to complete their FAFSA at some point to be considered for federal aid. Again, that's Pell Grant. federal work study, student loans, and some other things. However, they'll be given consideration for state aid like Cal Grant and middle class scholarships, and other programs that we offer through CSAC. I think it's important to, we think that students realize that they probably need to complete the FAFSA at a later date. I think that's the game plan. So this is right now kind of the Band-Aid or the fix that will at least show that they've done an application and they've done one on time. Once they complete their FAFSA application, they're going to convert that record from CADAA to FAFSA with CSAC. A lot of you are really familiar with that process because students sometimes do the wrong application and we have to convert it over. Sometimes they do the wrong academic year and we have to convert it over. Or sometimes a student will fill out the CADAA and then become eligible to fill out the FAFSA. So in that case, they will do the FAFSA and then we'll convert that over as well. So that's not an uncommon thing that we do, is converting one type of application to the other. Remember that the federal aid deadline is June 30th. We don't want students to wait until then. We want them to do it now. But the FAFSA you can essentially do anytime, but for this upcoming academic year, it's going to be June 30th. All right, so let's look at these. Whoops. There we go. All right, so let's look at these reasons that students may want to consider doing using the CADAA option for mixed status families. Like I said, there's a couple, I think, fairly significant reasons that they want to do this. So the benefits of doing this new CADAA option for mixed status families, I know it's a little convoluted. It doesn't really roll off the tongue. We kind of went around and round about what do we call this thing, but it doesn't matter what we call it. What matters is its functionality and how it's going to assist students. So this will allow students to lock in a submission date for state and institutional aid, right? If they are struggling to get their FAFSA done and they are not able to successfully submit it prior to the deadline, then they're not going to be given consideration for anything, or they're going to have to appeal. So if they do the CADAA, once that is submitted, the other advantage is they will get a student aid index, an SAI, which was previously the ESC. And that student aid index is really a key component to the processing of financial aid. You can't be given consideration for financial aid without an SAI. That would mean your application was not submitted or was incomplete. And the college can't provide the student with financial aid eligibility, unless there's an SAI on file. That is what they use to do the calculation for what a student should be considered for and what they're eligible for. If the student completes a CADAA, the California colleges listed on their application, so up to 20, we know that, can provide an award letter with estimated financial aid amounts. And this award letter will really give students a better idea of the financial assistance they can receive. This is a workaround. This is a workaround for mixed status families. And like I said, we know what's happening with the FAFSA. We're not going to belabor the point. So this is the alternative route that students can take to bypass some of these challenges they're having with the FAFSA application, as we have been discussing. Once they complete the CADAA, again, we want to make sure we're hoping that they will then continue to work on the FAFSA. And once they complete that and successfully submit it, as I mentioned previously, we can flip that over and convert that so they're given consideration for federal aid. So by participating in this process, it's going to assist them to at least have a date and an SAI, and have the ability to have a little bit of time to continue working on the FAFSA. All right. So this is CSAC's version of chutes and ladders. No, it's not. I think it's state law, honestly. If we do a PowerPoint, if you're a government agency and you do a PowerPoint presentation, you have to have a screen like this. I realize there's a lot going on here. This is going to be difficult for you guys to look at and digest, but it does have very good information. So when you get this, if you want to, print it out or take a look at it, so you get all the details, what it really shows you is if if for the students who are starting the FAFSA, this kind of identifies, where they're at and what they're going through. And then if they're unable to do the verification process, or they're having other challenges, do they want to start the CADAA, yes or no? And it kind of gives you an idea of the flow of how this could potentially work. So student can submit the CADAA now, lock in a submission date, receive an estimated award, or award aid letter. And then, like I said, I'm going to keep saying, once they do the FAFSA and complete it and successfully submit it, they are able to process through for federal aid once we convert that over. And we should note that now that FSA is automatically assigning these case numbers, that's good. That's an improvement. But we have parents who have been waiting and families who have been waiting for weeks and weeks and weeks, even after they've received that case number and they've submitted the information required for the parent to be identified. So a lot of these people have been able to get to that point, but they're still not hearing back. And this is another reason that we're offering this as a workaround. All right, so let's talk about the CADAA and what this looks like. Most of you are familiar with the DREAM Act application, the CADAA. Some people say CADAA. We don't care what you call it. In-house, we call it the CADAA. And if you get to that initial screen, you're going to notice that this has changed a little bit from previous years. And we have the login and the parent signature. And then below the login, we have the link for students to start a new account. Now, what's different is that we've done a lot of programming, because now we have the ability to use skip logic for both, our regular CADAA cohort and this new group of students who's filling out the application. So you know that the DREAM Act application uses skip logic and a series of questions that normally helps students determine if they should fill out the DREAM Act application. So that's changing a little bit, because now we have this other group of students who have social security numbers, and they're using the CADAA as a workaround. So everyone's going to log in the same place, assuming that you're starting the application for the first time. CADAA is going to ask you for a lot of similar information. So the demographic information, the financial information, parents' information, if it's a dependent student. And, that part of it hasn't changed. That part should look very familiar. All right. There's a QR code here. If you want more information, if you want to go to the application itself, you have a link on the bottom. Basically, if you Google CADAA DREAM Act application, you're going to get there, okay? Or you can go to the CSAC website, and it's relatively easy to find from there. So students are going to click on Need an Account, click here, and that's how they're going to get started. So let's talk about student registration. With the California DREAM Act application, there's no FSA ID. We don't have that, but we do have a registration process where students need to answer a bunch of questions. Like I said, you're going to notice that when students who have socials are going into this, it's going to ask them, a series of questions, and you're going to see some changes in that skip logic, because we have to account for this new group of students who are using this as a workaround while they're waiting to complete their FAFSA. So we're going to say, hey, do you have a social? That's a question that was on, the application previously. So the student's going to say, yes, I do, or no, I don't. All right. And then what they're going to see next is the second question is did you get the SSN through DACA, through Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals? That was sometimes the case. Now, we're not seeing that now very much with high school seniors, but, a few years ago, a lot of high school seniors, had DACA, and they had that work-only Social Security card. So sometimes they would, fill out the FAFSA erroneously. So that's why we asked them this question. We say, hey, did you get it through DACA? And they're going to answer that question, yes or no. If they say no, then they're going to be asked another question. And it's going to say, hey, are you a US citizen or eligible non-citizen? Obviously, for those FAFSA filers, they're going to answer yes and continue through the process. Now, this is a little bit different. This is a new screen. If they say yes, um, it's going to give them some additional information. And it also has an important note about, it says, if you're a FAFSA eligible student, you can use this process, but you should go back and complete and submit the FAFSA. If you choose to submit the CADAA now, here's what's going to happen. And it gives them some valuable information. So we hope that they read that. This this is really addressing the FAFSA specifically. This won't be asked if it's a you know, if it's a student who should be doing the CADAA and not for the purposes of using it as a workaround. That's what the screen looks like. All right, now let's keep going. So since these students who are FAFSA eligible have an SSN, they're going to be asked to provide it during the student registration process. Students should not enter an SSN if they have a DACA SSN. And like I said, we're seeing that less and less because we've had this hold on DACA. Don't get me started about that. But if they do have a DACA SSN, they're not going to use that on this particular screen. Students are going to have to provide their name and their date of birth. And some other information. Just a little aside, if the student's last name doesn't fit in the box because they have two last names or just one super long last name, it doesn't matter. It's going to truncate. It'll go through. That shouldn't be an issue. They have to also provide their mailing address and their email address. We highly recommend that the information, they want to make sure that the CADAA information they're providing here is what's on file with their high school, GPA upload, and they're going to use the same name as they had on their high school ID. It just makes it easier for us to find them and match them in the system. For those of you who do matching, when it doesn't match, in other words, when the application does not match with the application, or the application doesn't match with the GPA upload, excuse me, then 99% of the time it's the name. So we want to make sure this matches. If it doesn't match, everything is fixable, but it would be good if they can get through this without a delay. Again, I want to reiterate that this CADAA option for mixed status families is only available for first-time financial aid applicants. We're talking about things that potentially can happen for renewal students. That is a discussion that's ongoing. Right now, this process is available only to first-time financial aid applicants. And they, which includes high school seniors, I think mostly high school seniors. So if the student, for example, completed a FAFSA last year or a previous year, they're going to have to pursue another option. And we'll talk about some of that when we get to the FAFSA portion of today's presentation. So we're working to try to figure out how renewal students can have some different options, but right now this is what we've got, and we want to make sure that students are only using this if they're first-time applicants. As you go through this, this is kind of the usual suspects, right? Students are going to have to provide certain information, very much like the FAFSA. And so if the student, for example, most students don't file taxes if they're high school seniors, but sometimes they do. They have to go through and answer this series of questions. If they did file taxes, they have to report that information. Remember that the CADAA does not have the direct data exchange with the IRS. The reason that the FAFSA was able to shrink so dramatically was the whole application is now a direct data exchange, right? And so that's why they were able to shrink it down, because if you raised your hand and said, yes, it's fine that you plug in my information from the IRS, and yes, I consent, they eliminated a bunch of questions that way. CADAA doesn't have that option. They're going to have to provide tax information from 2022, and it's more of a manual process, obviously. Remember that students can list up to 20 colleges, and just one thing to bear in mind is that the CADAA is really for California schools and California colleges, and they're not going to be able to list a school outside the state. We recommend that they list all the colleges that they listed on the FAFSA, assuming that they were able to get that far and they were able to do that, and list up to 20. If students are sort of in this, I'm not sure where I'm going to go, I always say list one school from each segment. Even if you say I'm not going to a private school or I'm not going to a CSU, why would they do that? Well, they'll get an idea at some point about how much aid they can receive from each one of those segments. So that might be something that they want to do. Parent information will have to be supplied. So they have to supply their personal information on the CADAA. Again, this is demographic information like name and date of birth and address. They're going to have to answer all those demographic questions and provide financial information. Parents are going to have to provide the financial information manually. So they may have to go back and find those tax forms, but it's a manual process, like I said. They should have their tax forms ready before completing this part of the CADAA, because they're going to have to plug it in and find that information on the form itself and how it corresponds with what's on the application. On every CADAA, every question has a little I, like a little information I that is gray and circled. That means that if someone clicks on that, they're going to get a little help and hints box that pops up and gives them specific information. The other thing I'll point out is that on the CADAA, you have these red exclamation points. They're everywhere. And what that means is if there's a red exclamation point, it means that the student or the parents haven't successfully completed that part of the application, or there was a mandatory question that they didn't answer, or there was something that was answered incorrectly that didn't allow that section to be successfully completed. So as students are doing this and as parents are doing this, they want those red exclamation points to become green checks, and that means that they've successfully done that portion of the application. So parent tax information, just a reminder that CADAA doesn't have a direct data exchange, so have their 2022 tax information ready. It's a manual process. They may need other tax documents, or they may need, earning statements. They may need to know specifically what the dollar amount of their assets. If both parents worked in 2022, then both parents need to provide tax information, even if they filed taxes jointly, right? So this is a little bit different. Both parents need to provide information, assuming that they both worked. If only one parent worked, you could probably get away with just using the one parent and then that corresponding dollar amount. If the parents didn't file taxes in 2022, they can select no on this screen. We didn't file taxes, and then they're going to be asked to input their income for 2022, even if their income is zero. And so that is, you don't have to have necessarily filed your taxes, but you do have to indicate a dollar amount. One thing, if you say, we didn't file taxes, but we made $300,000, that's going to be a flag in the system, because that exceeds the threshold that the IRS says, hey, you have to file taxes. You exceeded this dollar amount. So we want to make sure that they're putting the accurate dollar amount, whatever that happens to be. This is a look at the current tax filing requirements. You can find this on the IRS website in the form section. If they didn't file a tax return and they have earnings over the threshold based on the information here, are they single, head of household, etc., then they may have to do an I-10. They probably should do an I-10. Bear in mind that the I-10 is not a super quick process. It takes time to get it. It takes money to get it. So if you have regular sort of CADAA filers or parents who don't have socials, then they may have to go through that process of getting the I-10 and then file taxes for the corresponding year. After they file the 2022 taxes, then they can come back here and make corrections or make updates to the application. All right, so the electronic signature process, very easy on the CADAA, and it's enhanced this year, so it's even easier. When the student finalizes the application, they're going to check those two little boxes and say, I've done everything right, all this information is accurate, and then their name will be electronically downloaded into the signature box with this really nice font. I'm not sure what that is, but and then they sign. That's it. That's pretty easy. So it will be an auto-generated signature, and student will just click, submit, and that'll be easy. The really big change is, oh, okay, I guess we don't have the really big change. I'll just mention this. The really big change is with the parent signature. A PIN is no longer required. Once the student signs, it just basically seamlessly goes to the next section, and the parent can sign electronically at that point. If only one parent had information on the application, then that's parent's going to show up. You're going to click the box next to that parent's name, and then their name is going to populate electronically into the box, and you're going to sign submit. If both parents have provided information, you're just going to pick one or the other, and then that's the person who's going to sign electronically. It's only going to be one parent. And then you submit that, and you're done. So let's talk about the confirmation page. When you have completed the FAFSA successfully, a couple things are going to happen. So in the past, if a CADAA filer completed this and got to the confirmation page, you would see their DREAM Act number, right? And their pseudo SSN that was provided through the DREAM Act application. And that's important for them to have, because if they call us or they call their school, they're going to ask them for that number. For students who have socials who are completing this, they're going to get their SSN, the last 4 digits of their SSN. They're also going to be able to see their student aid index. They're going to get some comment codes. And the main one that they're going to get is, you've indicated you're an eligible non-citizen or citizen, etc. And then they're going to have to read through that, and that will give them some additional information. It may also give them some other action items, so they should take a look at that. They can actually print this out. There's some new comment codes, specifically depending on their status and what they use the application for. They're going to go through, and it's just it reiterates that they're a U.S. citizen, but they've done a CADAA, and that they probably should complete the FAFSA, etc. So these are all new. Students are going to see these because we have this brand new cohort of students, right? So they're going to receive one of these 3 codes depending on their citizenship status. And the red text will let the student know really specifically about the CADAA option for mixed status families, the steps they should take. On comment code 918, this indicates that the student answered that they are a U.S. citizen, and they've chosen to complete the CADAA due to the issues they're having with the FAFSA. And then it advises students, this information is going to go to the college. College may be able to provide an estimate of financial aid at this point, but it also encourages students to, manually work on their FAFSA and eventually submit that FAFSA if at all possible. We've talked about this before. In this process, if students do the CADAA, FAFSA filers do the CADAA for the reasons that we've outlined previously, and then they successfully complete and submit the FAFSA, there's going to be a conversion process. So you want to, bear that in mind. We're gonna have more information about this. We realize this is a new process to these students, and maybe even to some of you, but completing the CADAA at least guarantees the submission date and that SAI. But once they do the FAFSA, we're going to have to complete this conversion. And students will have to complete a 1-page application conversion form from CSAC once they complete the FAFSA. We're going to be very on top of that and try to offer communications and informations on an ongoing basis, so students, don't forget that, and they realize that they need to do it. So that will be communicated, I'm sure, more than once, but just so you guys can bear in mind that that's part of this process. All righty. So I appreciate everyone being here for the first half. No, we're not done. For the first half of this presentation today, we're going to give you a quick 5-minute break. We're going to come back at, let's say, 3:45. So take a break, get a glass of water. I have this 1,000-piece puzzle I'm going to knock out here in the next 5 or 6 minutes. And we'll see you back here at 3:45. Thank you, everyone.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back from your break. My name is Yvonne Hollingsworth. I'm your second trainer for the afternoon. And so this is approaching our second half. This section will be just on the FAFSA, right? So we're going to introduce the way it should work, the way it has been working in some cases with issues and glitches, and then offer some workarounds for students who still need to complete the FAFSA, right? So I just wanted to introduce myself. I will also turn off my video and let us continue with talking about the FAFSA. All righty. So yeah, now that we've covered the CADAA for mixed status families, the CADAA option for mixed status families, let's talk about the FAFSA. So our students have likely already attempted to file the FAFSA. If they haven't, they should, right? If they are a FAFSA filer. Other students are in various stages of this process. Some students, as we've discussed, could not even get the FSA ID, or formerly called the FSA ID, now called the student.gov account. Some parents, if the students have a non-SSN contributor parent, were unable to even obtain those FSA IDs or get through the identity verification process. There have also been other glitches. And in fact, we just got a helpful tip in the notes here or in the chat box from one of our colleagues at one of the UCs. Just to remind us that if students are just missing a parent's signature, that's a little bit different than their parent not being able to obtain that student.gov account. So definitely students do need to first attempt that process before they use the DREAM Act application for mixed status families, right? So let us proceed. So I also wanted to highlight a brand new tool that was a collaborative effort by Immigrants Rising in Schools and Education Trust. They produced a tool that enables students to identify which situation they're in here. Either they've never filed a FAFSA, or they already started the FAFSA, but their contributor is having problems accessing the FAFSA. They've already submitted it, or they submitted an incomplete FAFSA, which is the incomplete FAFSA workaround. So various scenarios, and when a student selects one of those scenarios and follows the pathway, this will kick back a suggested solution or a suggested resolution or workaround. So that is a brand new tool that we just want to share with everybody because it may be very, very helpful to us, educators, and those supporting our students filing these applications. So just want to introduce that here at the link right here. Now, students who file the FAFSA or are eligible to file the FAFSA can also be eligible for federal aid on top of state and institutional aid, right? So these students can potentially tap into all of these various types of federal aid. And we want that. If the student is eligible for federal aid on top of state and institutional aid, naturally, we want them to maximize all the financial aid that they're eligible for. This is why even if a student uses the CADAA for MSF or CADAA option for mixed status families in the interim, ultimately, they will want to return to the FAFSA and complete that so that they can then receive that federal aid. Now, some advice both from CSAC and from the United States Department of Education. They're saying do not file a paper FAFSA. And we'll address those students who already have filed one. But if a student has not yet started the application, they don't want to do this by paper for all the reasons stated on the slide, right? There's no way to track those. And they're not going to be able to bypass the identity verification process anyway. It's just going to be a little bit of a longer process, but it's still going to require that the identity of all the contributors is being verified by FSA. So a lot of families initially thought that this might be a workaround to the challenges that they're experiencing getting that FSA ID, but unfortunately, this will not bypass that process. Also, this is very important. These paper FAFSAs are being processed dead last. So the FSA is going to process all of our electronic applications first, and then they will get to the paper FAFSAs, which means that If that student already did file a paper FAFSA, they definitely should not then go in and file an online FAFSA. And the reason is this, because if they file the paper FAFSA for the intention or with the intention of meeting a financial aid deadline or a college deadline, and then they follow up with an online application, that online application is going to overwrite the original submission date. You can see that right here. And it's going to basically return that original paper application to the student and the FSA will instead process the online version. So if the student has already filed the paper one, they just want to let it be and wait for that to process. One other reason why a paper FAFSA is not recommended at this point is because there's no training provided. So we at CSAC, your college professionals, we're really not trained in how to guide families on the paper application, but lots of good reasons not to do that at this late stage in the game. Now, about who needs a studentaid.gov account, formerly the FSA ID. This is the way this works, right? For our dependent students, if their parents are married and are filing taxes jointly, only one parent needs to create that account, because that one parent is then going to be able to import through the DDX data transfer with IRS. That one parent will be able to import the joint taxes. So FSA will receive the information for both parents, even though one parent is the only one that is going to create that FSA ID. If the parents are married and did not file taxes together, then both parents will need to create separate accounts to get their information onto that financial aid application. Now, if the parents are not married but living together, same thing as the situation down here. Both parents are going to need those accounts. They're living together. The assumption is that they're both providing for that child. Now, over here, if the parents are divorced or separated and not living together, this is where the student is going to provide the parent information, or the parent, rather, will provide their information if the parent is the one that provided the most financial support in the previous 12 months. That's the way that works there. And then if that parent did remarry, they're going to have to provide tax information for their spouse. So if they were married, if the parent who is providing the majority of that financial support is remarried and not filing jointly, then both parents again need to create that studentaid.gov account. Now, this creating the account becomes even more challenging when you have one parent with an SSN and one parent without. So once again, only one parent needs to create that account if the parents are married and file taxes jointly in 2022, right? We're using prior year tax information. So we go back 2 years. In this case, right, that parent with the SSN is the one that's going to create the studentaid.gov account. And then they'll be able, again, to import tax information from both parents because they were married filing jointly. And then with the parent without the social security number, they should not need a studentaid, I'm having trouble saying this word, studentaid.gov account. I'm much more familiar with FSA ID. At any rate, that second parent without an SSN should not need to create the FSA ID if indeed they're married to a parent with a social security number and the two parents are married filing jointly. The FAFSA does ask for the parent spouse's name, but that's not the same as actually being invited to contribute to the application. They simply want to know the parent's name. Now down here, both parents do need that studentaid.gov account. Once again, we just went over this on the previous slide, but it's good information. The parents are married and filing head of household. One of those parents is filing head of household. In that case, both parents need to create the account. Same thing here. Parents are married but filing separately, or the parents are not married but are living together. So to create that student.gov account, right, students and parents come to the screen and they're going to get started and try to create this FSA ID or student.a.gov account. By the way, this student.a.gov account is yours for life. Once a parent or a student fills that out, they will continue to use that indefinitely as long as they're contributing to an application as a student or as a parent. It doesn't matter. That same FSA ID or student.a.gov account will be theirs for life. So they should definitely keep track of it, take a picture of it, save it to their phones, some way that they can access it later. Now, dependent students are going to create their own student.a.gov account, as will the parents, which means that each individual contributor needs their own email. And that's even true of parents without the SSN. Everybody's got to create their own student.a.gov account if they are contributing to the application, with the exception of the married filing jointly parents, right? And here's a tip for you. When setting up that email address, it is definitely advised to use a personal address versus one of these addresses here that will likely be disabled after the student graduates, right? So we don't want that. We want a student to be able to receive our messages and our emails. So it's best if parents and students use a personal email address. Now, the fifth and sixth steps in creating this student.a.gov account does come with some errors, right? This has always been the case. This is not new with the 24-25 application, but students and their parents have often swapped one another's information because the questions are the same in each section, right? And so if a parent is trying to fill out their students section, the parent might inadvertently enter their social security number instead of the students. And so there are some mistakes that come with this. So parents and students should be very, very conscientious of the sections that they're working on and to make sure that they're only contributing to their own section and not a different contributor section. And then if they get stuck, right, we know that this phone number is not easy to get through right now, but that is the phone number for student.a.gov. We're hearing that some students may have better luck using the live chat feature and that the hold times are not nearly as long. So that might be an option for families that still need to reach out directly to student.a.gov. Now, the snags that we're seeing are numerous, right? So some parents, if they do not have that SSN, are not able to get through the identity verification process. So initially, if that parent indicates when they're creating their student.a.gov account that they do not have a social security number, they will see a series of questions that John kind of touched on. Questions from TransUnion, one of our credit bureaus, right? And it's going to ask them those normal questions like, did you have a car loan with this bank? Have you lived at these addresses, or which of these addresses have you lived at? So it will give them some identity verification questions. But the problem that we're finding is that many parents don't even have much of a profile with our credit bureaus. These might be parents who are living under the radar, and so they don't apply for loans and credit cards, and so they may not have a lot of information with TransUnion. If they do and they are able to answer those questions, fantastic. They'll get that student.a.gov and they can then use it immediately to contribute to their students' financial aid application. However, the majority of our parents, the majority of our non-SSN parents are in this scenario, right? They're not receiving the questions, or they don't answer them correctly. In that instance, they're going to have to go through the manual identity verification process. And that involves getting a case number or MANVER number, which just stands for manual verification. It's really one and the same number, but I believe the words MANVER precede the actual case number. But that is what parents need to do if they are in this situation where they can't get through the TransUnion questions or they can't get through the identity verification to ultimately create that studentaid.gov account. So they're going to have to get this case number. Now, nowadays, or not nowadays, I should say after March 5th, students who started that process after March 5th are now receiving those MANVER numbers with the case numbers automatically from FSAID through email. Students who started this process before March 5th are going to have their parents reach out directly to FSA to then obtain that FSAID, obtain the case number. Again, anybody who started this process before March 5th is going to have to reach out to get that case number for their parent. Anybody who started this after March 5th should have already automatically received the case number with that MANVER or manual verification information. And we'll show you a screenshot on the next slide what that MANVER, well, not of the MANVER number, but we'll show you a screenshot of the attestation form, which references the MANVER number. And the attestation form is listed here. So after that parent non-SSN contributor has received their case number or MANVER number, they're going to provide that information along with other documentation and send that in through email to ID verification at ed.gov. And that's how they're going to submit their attestation, their MANVER or case number, and their documentation or ID. So let's take a look at what that attestation form looks like. And then you can see in this third step, FSA will review those documents and ultimately confirm that the parent either successfully was able to get through the identification process or did not, and what other options there might be. But we're also talking to students whose parents have actually gotten an FSAID successfully, but they're not seeing the student's application when they log in to their account. They don't have a way to actually retrieve or access that student's account and sign it. So there are a lot of different issues or snags. And that's why the DREAM Act application for our mixed status families was launched, right, to address these issues so that students can definitely get a submission date and at least get an estimation for state and campus aid before that March 2nd deadline, or excuse me, March 2nd. Wow, the May 2nd deadline. I had to correct myself. Now, this is what the attestation form looks like. It gives the instructions and it specifies on, I don't think the next screenshot was included, the next page, but it specifies what type of documentation parents can use. And we actually have a screenshot of it on the next page though, or the next slide. Now, another issue that we're hearing is that some parents do not have any of the necessary ID. Some parents don't have any of these types of ID in column A, or both of these types of ID in column B. So I would encourage parents who are in that situation to reach out directly to FSA and ask what other types of ID might be possible, might be accepted. But know also that right now, FSA is saying these are the only types of documents that will be accepted, and they have to be valid and unexpired. So we know that that's been a challenge for some of our families. So again, I encourage those families to work directly with FSA so that they can inquire as to what other types of ID might be accepted in lieu of these. Now, there are also barriers for families if one of the parents lives, or both parents live in another country, right? The FAFSA application was really only designed to accept US addresses. So here are some workarounds for you. You might want to try that live chat, right, to get a case number. Or during the account creation, try this. Use a period or a zero for the street address, and then edit it later when the correction period opens up. Another workaround printed out by FSA was simply to use a US address and then later update it once the correction period has been opened. And then here's yet another tip. Since that phone number was really designed to accept a US phone number, it's an optional field. It's not a required field. So families can skip that particular question. Now, let's talk about a couple of workarounds. First, the workaround if the contributor invite is not received, right? So the parent set up the FSA ID, but they're not receiving that invite from the student. So the non-assessing contributor has a verified account and they can start the application. Sorry, let me back up. I didn't actually introduce this properly. Typically, the order is that a student starts the application first, right? And then they invite the parent. But as a workaround for parents who are not receiving those email invitations from the student, then here is the workaround. The parent can instead, with a verified account, can instead start that application. And instead of the student inviting the parent, this time the student can actually delete that application in the actions menu of their FAFSA, and that will then allow the parent to start the application and then invite the student. So it's the reverse of the norm, right? Normally it's the student inviting the parent. We're suggesting as a workaround for those students whose parents are not receiving the invitations to instead delete their application and have the parent start that application. Obviously, this is just for a parent that has successfully passed the identity verification and has a studentaid.gov account. Here is one a workaround that your students can attempt if they're in this situation. So this is what these screenshots would look like, right? So the parent's going to sign into their account and select start new form right here. They're going to then invite their student as a contributor and send that email invitation to the student. Both the student and the parent, or both parents, right, will need to then, they're basically providing their consent. When they establish that studentaid.gov account, that's verifying their identity. But then beyond that, when they enter the application, they also have to consent to this direct data exchange with the IRS so that they can import that data directly into the financial aid application. Everyone has to provide consent, including undocumented students or people who didn't file taxes. Now, when the parent starts this process, they're then going to see all of their sections first. They're going to fill out those sections and then ultimately get to the end of their sections and provide that checkbox, which is their electronic signature. It's not an actual signature. They don't type their name. They simply check the box, and that will input their electronic signature. Once the parent does that, then the student then sees their sections, completes their sections, and then once again, once they finished all those sections and are ready to sign, it is just the click of a button, and that is their electronic signature. Once that passes all the processes, then that student has a fully completed FAFSA. It says up here, it's complete. It's not in draft. It's not in progress. It is actually completed. That student's job is done. Now they're just going to wait to hear back and receive that FAFSA submission summary, showing them what their projected SAI is and what types of aid they might be able to receive, federal aid they might be able to receive. Now, here is the other workaround that was introduced. I don't know when it was introduced, but it was introduced at some point along the way when FSA became aware of these various issues and glitches that our students and families are experiencing. So they said, hey, here's another option. If you're unable to get your application to submit, let's have you complete, or not even complete. We're going to have you start an application, but it's going to be called the incomplete FAFSA, because it will then provide the student with a submission date which is super important if that student has a college deadline or a financial aid deadline that's coming up sooner rather than later. In California, we're lucky that we got that deadline extended to May 2nd, but not all states are in that same situation, and not all colleges have extended their admission deadlines either. So for the students that really needed to get a submission date, they could have done an incomplete FAFSA. Notice though that this incomplete FAFSA does not provide an SAI, so their colleges are not able to package even estimated federal aid with this incomplete FAFSA, but it does save that date for the student. So the incomplete FAFSA works like this, that students, non-SSN contributors having difficulty verifying the identity, so that student's going to opt to use the incomplete FAFSA workaround. The student will complete their section, and then on the submission screen, they're going to scroll down to this bottom section and say that they're going to provide their parent information manually. That's where the parent does manually provide that information and then submits the application. It will be incomplete, but that submission date will be saved. However, once again, the SAI will not be estimated. So that financial aid office is not going to be able to provide the student a financial aid package for their federal aid, but the student will be guaranteed an on-time application, right? So when that student needs to return to complete their FAFSA or financial aid application, they're probably going to be in a required action required status, right? So if they are in this situation, once that correction window opens up, right, that's what we're waiting on. We're waiting, and John just alluded to this earlier, but FSA is saying top of next week. So we're expecting from the 15th moving forward that students will be able to make corrections. So once that correction window opens, that's when the student's going to have to log back into their account and have that parent sign that. So the parent will hopefully be able to get through that studentaid.gov application process or account creation process. And then the process will be back to the norm. The student is going to then invite the parent as a contributor. The parent gives their consent and then signs and submits. And then that status from action required will then change to a process status. And that's going to then email that student a confirmation, letting them know that the application was successfully processed. The student should then follow up with the financial aid office and make sure that, you know, all things are in order and that there's no documentation pending. Now, making corrections, right? We're all waiting for this application correction window to open. We know many students need to make corrections to their applications. So when that happens, once they open it up, we're going to expect a flood of students returning to their financial aid applications online and completing their incomplete FAFSAs, or adding more schools if they need to, just updating information, any and all corrections. Once they're open, students should log in and finish their financial aid applications sooner rather than later. So I wanted to mention that since we've been talking about this FAFSA section, keep in mind that our renewal students might still be stuck in this limbo, right? They're not yet able to use that DREAM Act application for our mixed status families. So those renewal students, until we have an option for them to file the DREAM Act application, those students should still continue to try to get those applications submitted. Really, any and all students, once a correction window opens, should try to complete their financial aid applications. So I will leave you with some resources before we close. Just some tips on how we can all support our students, right? If you are trying to help a student who's stuck in a rut, if they are eligible, they're a first-time filer, if they're eligible to file the DREAM Act application for mixed status families, that might be a great interim solution so that that student does get a submission date and a projected SAI for state and campus aid. But you might want to do a little troubleshooting with your students and get more information so you can better assist them. Maybe point them to that new tool that was rolled out by Immigrants Rising and Ed Trust West. But you can start by asking the student, who all needs to contribute to your application? Does the student even know? And what is the marital status of their parents? What is their tax filing status? All of these things matter, as we've seen, right? And students may just not have all of the necessary information. So do a little troubleshooting to see if we can get the student on the right track. And if it's that they're just truly stuck because of this non-contributor, non-SSN contributor glitch, this might very well be an option, the DREAM Act application for mixed status families, at least in the interim, right? Until that student can return to the FAFSA and get that successfully submitted. So again, that option though is just for our first-time filers, right? Renewal students we're working on that. But as of today, we don't yet have a solution for our renewal students, so they should continue to work with their FAFSA and certainly stay abreast of all the updates that FSA is releasing on an almost daily basis. So I encourage all of you as educators and all of your students to stay attuned to what's going on with FSA ID so that they know when that correction window opens. And then again, students with the incomplete workaround are going to need to return to those financial aid applications and get those successfully processed. Some more ways that we can help our students, right? Point our students to or either host your own FAFSA DREAM Act night where you're going to help your students file those applications, or point them to an existing Cash for College webinar. We also have in-person workshops. You can actually go to our Cash for College email address or Cash for College webpage. If somebody can please put that in our chat, and you can actually find, or your students can find, an upcoming workshop either virtually or in person. And many of those workshops are actually offered in different languages as well. So that's really, really helpful. And that's the whole point of a Cash for College workshop. It is to help our students get through that financial aid application, and they have subject matter experts on hand from colleges, from high schools, from school districts, and from the commission. So we all are there to try to help our students. We know this has been an extremely challenging year, so we'll do everything we can to help you and to help our students. Also, for outreach purposes, this is a great tool for our K-12 schools, right? Blast this out on your school website or on your morning PA announcements. Let students know there's still time to apply. Don't leave money sitting on the table. Submit that application and we'll get you the help to get that application submitted. Promote these various listservs that we have, which is specific to our students and families. And that's going to enable them to know what changes CSAC is making, what updates there might be, and any other good and pertinent information. And then maybe also let your students know about these letters around the FERPA law, which protects students' information and privacy, and then this joint letter between CSAC and the California Department of Education about the privacy that CSAC exercises when students submit those financial aid applications. CSAC never uses student data to share with the federal government. CSAC protects the data of all of our students judiciously. So please let our families know that, so that they feel comfortable submitting these applications without fear. And then some additional resources for you, just links that you can all click on and play with and get any and all information that's going to help our students get these applications submitted. And then if you've never visited our social media sites, check it out. Maybe share those with your students. Students definitely relate better to TikTok than they do, say, to a text message. So we have videos aimed at our students. We have other announcements and PSAs, lots of good information on these various social media handles. And then once again, as a reminder, Our state deadline has been extended to May 2nd. So the Cal Grant, the middle class scholarship, those students still have time to apply. That concludes our presentation for today. I hope this was helpful to all of you. I hope the new solution, the DREAM Act for mixed status families, does offer some relief to the students who are eligible to file that application. But know also that we are hosting additional webinars around this topic, specific to this cohort of students that are FAFSA filers but have a non-SSN contributor, aka students from mixed status families who are really encountering unprecedented issues with submitting a financial aid application. So again, thank you so much for your time this afternoon, for your questions. Thank you for all of my colleagues behind behind the scenes who have been answering your questions. So appreciated. Go out and let's do some good work and get those applications submitted and help our students. We will see you next time. Thank you, everybody. John, did you want to add anything?
No, I just wanted to say it looks like all the questions have been answered. So just wanted to thank everyone for joining us on this Friday. Thank you, Yvonne, for doing a great job as usual. Check CSAC, check our website. We have lots of other informational webinars coming up. So feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions about this process. So thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day and a great weekend. Thank you.